Welcome to Crackling Rosie, True Crime. Today on the docket, David Berkowitz, the .44 caliber killer. Welcome to the Let's Discuss portion of this live premiere with Crackling Rosie True Crime. I'm so grateful to have you joining me this evening for coffee, cocktails, and crime. Our trailer that we put out earlier this week discusses basic facts of the overall crime in regards to David Berkowitz, the .44 caliber killer. So in a moment, I am going to attempt to share my screen in case you missed it. So bear with me. It looks like I got it. All right. I hope that you enjoyed that. Gives you a little bit of basic facts on the case. But again, this video or this portion of the mini-series will be covering the birth of a serial killer. So we're going to be talking about David Berkowitz from birth to pre-killing spree. So let's discuss. All right. So first things first, a few items of discussion. This platform is intended to be a study group, an area where we can share our knowledge, where I can learn, hopefully that you can learn. I've already been contacted by Son of Sam enthusiasts and have gotten plenty of advice from them. So to those people, I really do thank you, because even though I've been inundated with details and articles and all kinds of studies that I've been doing, it really made me dive even deeper. And at this point, I will share, I am not claiming to be an expert in this case. I am learning more and more details about the case. I am familiar with the case. I was 10 years old at the time of the killing spree, and I lived in New York. So I'm familiar with the case. I'm very knowledgeable with the original case narratives. And over the past few months, I've been studying, well, ever since the Netflix came out, I really took a deeper dive, started reading Maury Terry's book and all that good stuff. But I want to take this as a study group so it goes piece by piece. What I don't want, don't come at me with, oh, those are just very basic facts. What I'm sharing on the beginning part of the video before we discuss are basic facts, and you may or may not know them already. What I don't want to do is just regurgitate everything that's been done on the internet. If you want to deep dive like I'm deep diving, there's already a lot of great resources on the internet. What I personally have been diving into and rewatching are the actual David Berkowitz interviews. They intrigue me like I can't even explain. But today's Let's Discuss, this video is on the early years, birth to pre-killing spree. And I know that the older he gets into his teens, that's where there's more controversy. We're not going to deep dive into that today. The purpose of diving into some of the more factual things, and I also make it clear, this has been reported, this is something David Berkowitz said in his interview, this is something so-and-so said. I don't claim my opinions to be fact. I state what's a fact if it's according to police record or that sort of thing. And then if it's a theory or just my opinion, I'm very clear about that as well. And I hope that you feel open enough to share your opinions. So again, that's where we start. I'm a studier. I'm a true crime enthusiast. I am not a member of law enforcement, nor have I ever been. So let's set that aside, and now let's discuss. I'd like to remind you that this is a premiere video, which means that it has been pre-recorded, and that allows me to be in the chat with you. So as we discuss, I really encourage you to bring your ideas to the table, give us comments, questions, anything at all. We just ask that you keep it respectful and that you stay on the subject, on the topic, okay? So stay on topic. We're discussing the early years. We're going to talk about some facts, and then we're going to try and dive into the psyche a little bit of David Berkowitz, about his experiences and circumstances as a child and what may have led him to the crimes. So what do we know? So we know Berkowitz was born in 53, June 1st, 1953 to be exact. That puts him at 23, 24 at the time of the crimes, and about 68 years old today. He was born out of wedlock. His biological mother is Rebecca Falco, also known as Betty, and mainly referred to as Betty, and his bio dad is Richard Kleinman. Both Betty and Richard were married to two different people. So Betty was married after she had a daughter. Her name, I believe, was Rosalind. And that is, David was to learn later that that was his half-sister. After she had Rosalind, her husband took off. And old school, they stayed, they stayed married, but he was not in the picture. Richard Kleinman he was married and he had his own family and they were still together. But he carried on an affair with Betty. And after, it was my understanding, actually I learned from the In My Words interview with David that they had an affair for many, many years. And several years into the affair, Betty became pregnant with David. And when Richard found out about the pregnancy, he was not into it at all. He wanted nothing to do with the pregnancy. He wanted nothing to do with the baby. So there was a lot of turmoil there. So what happens is Betty puts David up for adoption. She learns through a friend, is my understanding, that there was this really nice Jewish couple in their 40s wanting a baby, and they were open to the idea of adoption. So David was adopted just a few days after birth. He was born in Brooklyn, and the couple that adopted him was Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, and they lived in the Bronx. So they pick up David, they take him to the Bronx, and they raise him as their own. We learn from David that at about 4 years old, which is so young, his adoptive parents tell him that he's adopted. And he really didn't quite understand, but they shared with him that his mother had died in childbirth, and that his father didn't think that he would be able to raise him on his own, so he decided to give him up for adoption. David also claims that that was the norm for adoption agencies, I guess, so that there wasn't a lot of questions, a lot of trying to find bio parents. That was a common thing to tell children back then. So let's think about that for a moment. He's very young, so he probably didn't understand that almost at all. And then to be told that your mom died giving birth to you. So in David's own words, he was traumatized by that. As a little boy, he's like, what did I do? I killed my mom? Did I do something wrong? I must be bad. I really encourage you to watch the interview In My Own Words, and I have linked it in the Son of Sam playlist on my channel. So definitely check that out. It's really interesting, and he goes into some depth about his biological parents as well as his adoptive parents. So they tell David this, and he's distressed about this. He's a little boy. He really doesn't understand. And it really caused him a lot of pain, a lot of distress, and a lot of it he just couldn't understand. I don't know, what do you think? Do you think that he was way too young to get that information from his parents? Adoption is so controversial because you hear, okay, you tell him too young and there's trauma that results from that. And you hear stories of people who are adopted and don't learn until later in life, and then they're pissed off at their parents that was kept from them and they weren't told the truth. So it could go either way, but go ahead and drop your comments in the chat. If you don't catch this live rather, the comments will be open, and you can, on the replay, you can definitely leave your comments underneath the video. But what do you think about that? I mean, if you were adopted, would you want to hear it earlier in life and let it settle in? I mean, I know I wouldn't want to hear that it was my fault or that my mom died in childbirth. That could totally be so distressing for a child. So you're kind of starting off there. In his own words, his adoptive parents were wonderful people. And they did what was the norm then. They told him what was the norm. So he didn't blame them for anything, but he does discuss how much it affected him. Some of the other things that he shared in this interview was that he was undiagnosed ADHD. And maybe a lot of you are young and don't really have knowledge of this, but, and I wasn't born in the 50s either, but back then there was a lot that was undiagnosed when it came to mental illness, okay? There was a lot of stigma. There still is today, and we need to do something about that. But there was, whatever stigma there is with regards to mental illness today, it was quadruple back then. So there were children who had all kinds of things, and they just wrote it off as behavioral issues. So David claims he had hyperactivity, he couldn't sit still, he would wake up super, super early, throw all his toys around, and because they didn't understand this and he wasn't being treated for it, it was another thing that got him spiraling out of control. He spoke of darkness. He spoke of just confusion, never feeling like he fit in. He just always felt that there was something wrong with him, and he always felt this profound sense of sadness and depression. And a lot of it, he feels, stems from the story that his mom died in childbirth, his bio mom. So think about that for a moment. I mean, what would you want to be told, and when would you want to be told? Something to discuss a little bit. So, because of his conditions, he didn't do that great in school. I've read that he's been noted to be above average intelligence. I've read that he's about average intelligence. But when you hear his interviews, he's quite an intelligent gentleman. I am not, please don't think, we're diving into his psyche a little bit. Number one, I'm not a trained psychologist. I'm not a doctor. And I'm not trying to glorify David Berkowitz. What he did was wrong. And although he's gone through different changes in his life, which we will discuss in a later video, I'm not trying to glorify him. I'm just trying to dig into the circumstances to why he might have did what he did, okay? So don't call me a murderer, lover, or anything like that. I'm not a David Berkowitz junkie. Although with all this study, I'll tell you, I know so much more about him now than I had ever thought I'd want to know or ever expected to know. Anyhow, so due to his hyperactivity and his inability to concentrate and sit still, he had problems in school. He says he had some friends, but he just never felt like he could connect. He always felt a feeling of disconnect. Now, we're talking about a little boy. We're not talking about the crazy man that went and committed all these murders. We're talking about a little boy. He was lucky enough to be adopted by a loving family. And yes, there's some controversy behind that, but I'll be honest, I haven't dug deep enough to really go into that discussion. I like to talk facts. I like to be very clear when something is my opinion, and I feel that I didn't dig deeply enough into that. But in his own words, the Berkowitzes were wonderful parents. He couldn't ask for better parents. They were a little on the poor side. His dad worked hard. He had to work every day. But he blames himself. He does not put blame on his parents, which I was quite impressed to see in videos of his take on things, at a later date. Now, of course, I'm sure it was different as a youth and as a teenager, because come on, as a teenager, we blame our mom and dad for everything. It doesn't matter what it is, it's their fault. So I'm sure he felt that way at the time, but as an adult, as a senior, he takes the blame for everything and does not put it on his bio parents nor his adoptive parents. And he really speaks, with a lot of reverence for both sets. Well, he didn't get to know his adoptive dad, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So he had problems in school, and, at a young age in his teens, when he had this obsession with fire starting, pyromanic pyromanic. I don't know if that's a word, but pyromania. And he liked to start fires. He got into trouble. He had some problems with petty larceny, but the thing is, he never really got into trouble. So he got away with these things. And I don't think it was the same video. It was another video. It might have been the Maury Terry videos. The Maury Terry video, he talks about having this sense of fulfillment that he was able to get away with these things. So you've got a boy given up at birth. He learns at a young age that he was given up, that his mom died in childbirth, that his father didn't think he could raise him. So now you have rejection issues. Why didn't my dad love me? Why didn't he want to keep me? Is it because I killed my mom, or it's my fault that mom died, that his wife died? So you've got that kind of stuff going on. You've got obvious signs of mental illness, and you have hyperactivity, no concentration, depression. You have all this going on in his youth. So he gets into trouble in his teens, but never serious trouble. And then later in his, let's see, he was, I think, 13 or 14. His mom, Pearl, dies of cancer. And research has shown, or I have read, that he talks about how close he was and how devastated he was when his mom, Pearl, died. So after his mom dies, I guess a few years later, his dad remarries and then eventually moves down to Florida. So David is kind of on his own. He's displaced. He meets up with friends, and actually, let's back up. He enlists. He's 17 or 18 years old. He enlists in the service. And I think a lot of that has to do with, well, you know, his dad's moved, his mom has passed. I'm sure there was some strain, as there always is, even with good step-parents. There's always some strain and animosity in the relationship with the children. So I'm sure there was some of that going on. And I believe he really felt alone. And so all of the feelings that he had as a little boy just magnified, they intensified as a teenager. So probably having nothing else to go to, he enlists in the Army. And I do believe he was 18 when he enlisted in the U.S. Army. And he was honorably discharged 3 years later. And upon his discharge, he found himself, you know, now he's out of the Army. He was on GI Bill, so he did some college. He had his own apartment, and he had some various blue-collar jobs. So he worked, I believe he worked for USPS, and he also worked for a security guard, a security company, rather, as a security guard. He ultimately goes to this party where he meets up with some people that he becomes friends with. Now, we're not going to dive too deep into this. This is where it can go really deep, and we will dive deeper in discussion once we have facts and information that supports that period of time. So that would be a short period of time, a couple of years prior to the killing spree, or those few years is what led up to the killing spree. But without mentioning names, because again, I want to really deep dive and be able to share facts with you before I share my opinions. He was mixing up with the wrong crowd. There is talk of this crowd being part of occult practices, and so on and so forth. Okay? So you've got a little boy, all this trauma leading into youth and early teens, trauma magnetized, mother passes, joins the service, comes out, tries to start a life, And by his own words, he was just, he felt so disconnected. He knew that he had issues. He knew that there was so much darkness within him. And he did have interest in the occult. He read the Satanic Bible. He wanted to learn more about the occult. And, you know, when you're coming from a place of internal darkness, the worst thing you could do now is start dealing in that environment, the environment of dark occult practices, because that just all gets in your head. And that takes that darkness, and it grows and it grows and it grows, where I think he believes, and in my opinion, I believe, really got to the point in his head where it just, it took him over. I really believe that. I believe that mental illness plus, lack of treatment for that mental illness, plus getting involved in dark practices, that's a ticking time bomb. And that's exactly what happened. This leads us up to the killing spree. Again, I will cover just those few years after the service and his involvement. His friends, will talk about them in greater detail. But I just wanted to summarize where he was when he reached that age. I think it was 23, 24, and then went on this crazy killing spree. Again, I know there's lots of stories that he didn't commit all the murders, but to his own admission, he was, if he really didn't do them, he admitted to them, obviously. He's serving time for all of them. Case was closed after he admitted or confessed. But now there's, trickles of different story. And it's not just now, it's been for a while, where there is thought and theory that he did not commit all of the murders. But again, to his own admission, he was present for all of them and assumes guilt. He's not throwing the guilt anywhere else. He's admitted, he's confessed, he believes that he is where he belongs, and that's where I'm going to stop today. I really just wanted to discuss those primal early years. I mean, all of our synapses are, not all of them, but a great deal of our synapses in our brains, those connections are made in the first few years. Those are the most formative years. And again, going back, you have to watch that In His Own Words video. He discusses deeply into some studies, research, a book that a friend gave him, where they go deep, the psychologists go deep into being in the womb. And he speaks of stress that his bio mom experienced while he was still in the womb. Now, some people might feel this is woo, but I personally believe it. I believe in energy. And if a mom is carrying a baby and she's stressed because her lover does not want this baby, is forcing her basically to give him up for adoption. It's said that she, fought him and really wanted to keep David. I'm referring to Betty Falco, his bio mom. So she's going through all this stress while the baby's in the tummy. I really believe that energy is rubbed off on the baby, and the baby would absolutely feel that to some degree negatively. You may not believe that, but again, discuss. Put it in the comments, put it in the chat if you're here with me live. Let me know what you think. I'm sorry I haven't been going through my notes, but that's kind of the way I am. I'm a dance and yoga teacher too. I do the same thing. I put these notes together, I put them in front of me, I look at them quickly, and then I shoot with my class, and that's where it goes. So I probably missed a lot, and I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm eager to study. I hope that maybe you have some information that you would like to respectfully share with me. Let's discuss. I'm going to do my best to get back to each and every chat and comment. There probably won't be a lot of people in the chat. This is a repurposed channel, and I just started, most of my stuff is private, but I just started re-releasing some old stuff, looking at, like, this case. I was always intrigued with this case. I was 10 years old when the crime spree happened, but we've learned a lot in the last few years, so I thought it would be cool to study a little bit more, and then really important is to build a community where we can share. I really like that, and I hope that you like that too. So anyway, I'm going to sign off. This is probably rambled for a while. Crackling Rosie here. This is part 1, the early years. Next, we will be talking about the killing spree. We will go into some detail about the victims. I do want to see if I can make some communication with any involved. I don't want to get too deep into anybody's personal information if I don't have permission to do that. I know that a lot of it's in public domain, so I may just stick to the facts when it comes to the victims and the victimology. I don't think I'm going to go deep into that, because I know that there are survivors, and they're still there. They're still out there. I've been contacted already by one, so I want to be respectful. I don't only expect you to be respectful. I need to be respectful of people's privacy. So the next one, again, is going to be a little bit more timeline of the killing spree, the victims. We'll probably have to go to another Let's Discuss chat for the manhunt, the craziness that NYPD experienced and all of that, and then finally the arrest. Once we've put this mini-series to rest, which is kind of just taking what we know, then we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of Maury Terry's theories, some other theories that are out there. I really want to talk about that stuff. But again, I don't want this to be some regurgitated channel. I want to have intelligent conversation. I want to be clear about what's opinion, what's fact, what's theory, what's probably on the crazy side of conspiracy, and all that jazz. I think I spoke enough for today, so thank you so much. Please subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell thingy so that you'll know when the next video is up and ready. Thank you. Have a great night or day.